Okay, so it is now 11 o'clock. I am talking to you from Cambridge. Nice bright morning. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that's close to my heart because it's what makes TOK for me so much fun, and I think for my students so much fun. There's more to it than that, though. I think the opportunities we have to introduce our students to some fantastic thinkers, or as I've put it here, knowledge heroes, makes TOK, it's one of the things that makes TOK such an amazing educational experience. One of the things that I think helps to give our students a complete education. So it's a topic that I really like talking about and thinking about, and I wanted to share with you some of the thinkers that I try to introduce to my students. So just a breakdown of what we'll be looking at today. This will be a normal length, 45 minutes to an hour or so, depending on how excited we all get. I want to just define what I mean by a knowledge hero, the criteria that I use for deciding on who to include in TOK lessons. I want to talk about what I call unfiltered knowledge. This webinar and the whole concept of knowledge heroes is it's also close to my heart because it's all about what I call textbookless talk. In other words, not using a textbook to teach. I think ideally we wouldn't use any textbooks at all in any subject. I see them as a necessary evil in some subjects, but I think in TOK, whilst there are some very good textbooks out there written by very good people, I still don't think we should use them. I think we should try and force our students to go to the source of knowledge directly, unfiltered knowledge. So I'll talk about that in the third part of the webinar. So then I'm going to give you some examples of knowledge heroes, people who I think work very well with the core theme. We might want to think a little bit about what the core theme actually is. Because I've had loads of questions about, what should we be doing? Is this the same as the ways of knowing? What does it actually mean? Well, I'll give you my interpretation. Then I'll give you 3 knowledge heroes that I think work very well in connection with the optional themes. And then finally, the areas of knowledge. And I've spent quite a lot of time over the last few days putting together some playlists, which I'd like to just share with you towards the end of the webinar. And then finally, just outline the resource that this is kind of based on, the Knowledge Heroes resource, which, if you remember, you've probably already seen. I hope you're finding it useful. If you're not a member, then you still have access to quite a, I hope, generous sample version of it, which has 20 or so thinkers in it. So, you can get a good idea of what this resource is and why I like to draw on these people by downloading that. Okay, so just very quickly, I give the same screen every time. I'm Michael Dunn. I'm the creator of theoryofknowledge.net, and very soon a new website, which I'm very excited about, but I won't talk about that yet. That will be another webinar, but I'm about to launch a second website, which is quite exciting. Questions and contributions. I love to hear from you out there. So if you have any questions, we might have time at the end of this, so you can send them via the chat and I'll try and respond to them here in the webinar. Otherwise, by all means, just send them to me afterwards and I will respond to them in the debrief email, in which I will put a link to the presentation that you're looking at right now, and the FAQs that I get, common questions that people send in, and maybe a few questions of my own sort of creation to hopefully guide you in this area. So I'll be sending that out to everyone. Excuse me, if you've registered for this. And I'll be uploading the video to the YouTube channel, so you should be able to find it quite easily. Okay, so first of all, what do I mean by a knowledge hero? What do I look for when I try to include a thinker in a TOK lesson? Well, yeah, obviously these are people who can provide us with an understanding of a concept or an idea that works very well in TOK. I mean, for example, we have those 12 key concepts. A lot of the thinkers, a lot of the knowledge heroes have a lot to say about the key concepts or aspects of the key concepts, and their ideas will help students to understand them, and hopefully kind of register in their minds and in their memories, looking at, say, power. Right now, I remember one or two people that we looked at to do with power. I remember looking at Winston Churchill in connection with perspectives, and vice versa. Hopefully, via the concepts themselves, our students will be able to recall and discuss the key thinkers who we look at, our knowledge heroes. I try to pick thinkers who are very influential. In other words, they've come up with a very important idea, an idea that has really shaped the way that we understand the world. Or doesn't have to be that. I've got a lot of thinkers in there that hopefully you won't have come across, that I hadn't come across before I started creating TOK resources. But I just thought they were very cool communicators of ideas, very, very cool at getting their ideas across. Some of them, obviously, quite a lot of them actually have both of those sort of characteristics. They have influential ideas, and they're very good at communicating those influential ideas. So, those are the sort of best of the knowledge heroes, really, I suppose. I really sort of lock on to thinkers who give us quite a controversial idea, an idea that might challenge students' assumptions and our assumptions as teachers about the world, really sort of rock their certainty about what they're seeing, about what they're thinking. So yeah, the ones that are, I've put it before as excuse me, busting assumptions, assumption busters. So I try and draw on some of those people that are a little more challenging, sometimes even a little uncomfortable for students. But I think that's part of what we try to do in TOK. We try and make it uncomfortable. We try and make it challenging, to force them to really question the way that they look at the world. And here's the thing, I think that sometimes as teachers, we focus too much on our courses. I know it's difficult. You focus on your course because you want to get the best possible grades. You want to succeed at delivering the course. We're all very, very busy. It's difficult to deliver everything you want to deliver and still manage to prepare them for assessments, be they exams or internal assessments. But with TOK, I think we should be aiming beyond the course. We should be aiming way beyond the essay, way beyond the exhibition or the presentation, whatever it is that you're doing. At the very least, to the point where we're thinking about university entry, I think TOK is one of the ways in which our students can really enrich their application to university. But I'm an idealist. I'm thinking, towards that aim that the IB has of creating lifelong learners, people who will make a difference to the world, people that will continue wanting to learn about ideas and concepts in the world, people who will be aware of our life. What is water? If you don't know what that means, you can email me and I will tell you. What is water, I think, sums up TOK. We want people who are aware, people who are active, people who are positive members of the epistemic community. And I think by introducing them to men and women who are that, it's a great model for them. It's something for them to aspire to, something for them. I've chosen this word knowledge hero, this phrase knowledge hero, deliberately because these truly are, heroes. They are trailblazers. They've shaped the way we understand and look at the world. And I think that the students should have great admiration for them. So we're trying to go beyond just the TOK course, beyond the diploma, and really genuinely try and change lives. Okay, so excuse me, I wanted to discuss unfiltered knowledge. Now, I talk a lot about delivering textbookless TOK. Now, I think the reality is that most schools will rely on textbooks. I personally don't. I try to create all of my resources for my students. And I think that's perfectly possible to do. And one of the main reasons for that is that I want students to get out there and go straight to the horse's mouth, hence the image. You get it. Hear the actual people who have come up with the ideas, or read about their ideas. So I think we should be approaching knowledge in an unfiltered way. We shouldn't necessarily be repackaging their ideas. We certainly shouldn't be sort of cherry picking the ideas that we are using, or little extracts of ideas. Students, as much as possible, should be going straight to the source of these amazing ideas and concepts. And I think it's important, not just because it will enable them to get the full picture of what a person is saying. I think it's also important because they can learn about communicating ideas. This is why I pick some of these knowledge heroes, because they're brilliant at expressing ideas. Not all of them are, I have to say. Surprisingly, one or two very erudite, influential people are quite bad, actually, when you see them talk. I won't say who I think that is, but some of them are not great, but most of them are. And I think this is just as valuable a lesson as the ideas themselves. How do you get an idea across? It's one thing to have them in your head, but how do you express them? And these people can show you a variety of ways that can be done effectively. So I don't think that the TOK course is just about absorbing ideas, but it's learning about how to express your ideas, to communicate your ideas. I've said in other webinars that I think TOK is a huge opportunity for us to really get the 4 C's of education across: critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration. That idea of communication is so important for them, and I think TOK is a great opportunity for us to do that. So unfiltered knowledge. We have infinite possibilities as TOK teachers. That's the challenge of it, but that's the beauty of it. We can draw on almost anyone in our lessons. We can draw on almost any idea. Here are some of the ideas, that have resonated with me. But of course, everyone has their own knowledge heroes. So, I offer you my suggestions, but I'd be really, I'd like to hear about yours if you want to get back to me with a few knowledge heroes that have worked for you. I am aware that being who I am, from the background I am, the place I come from, the language I speak, we all have our own biases. So my selection could be more diverse, but I've tried my hardest to find thinkers and heroes from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different languages, different genders, and so forth and so on. So I do want to make it more diverse. So if you have any suggestions about how I can do that, then I'll be very interested to hear that. Okay, so let's start with the core theme. Now, the core theme, to me, the way I understand the core theme is that this is a more personal look at knowledge, our relationship as individual knowers with our knowledge, our ways of processing ideas, not necessarily easy to label and define in a really kind of narrow way. It's a lot of different processes that we go through in order to acquire knowledge about the world. I think there's a lot of overlap with the old ways of knowing. So I think if we're considering things like sense perception and memory and intuition and imagination, I think all of those can be very, very relevant to the core theme, knowledge in the knower. So here's 3 people that have worked really, really well for me. I won't follow the links. I'm just going to very quickly talk about each one of these people and say how I think they work quite nicely for this particular aspect of the course. So Tayselassie is an incredible speaker. She definitely hits both of those sort of targets: a great communicator of ideas and someone with a great idea. And I don't know about you, but I still remember going to university, and the first question that everyone asked was, "Where are you from?" And I tell students that I teach that this is the question that they're going to get more than any other when they go to university, especially, you know, the students that I've mostly dealt with over the last 20 years or so come from South America. So, you know, they wander into university looking quite exotic, speaking a different language to most of the other English-speaking people if they're in the States, Canada, the UK, and so forth. Where are you from? And Tayselassie has a fantastic objection to that question. She says that rather than saying, where are you from, you should ask the question, where do you feel local? I'm very disappointed that it's actually been hijacked by a British bank for one of their TV commercials, which I think is really annoying, but there we go. This is a fantastic, the link there takes you to her TED talk, but she's a writer. You can find out a lot of her ideas from the book she's written, and she's on, you can find her very easily on the internet. She's quite a rich source of ideas, but this one idea I think is fantastic for TOK. I think it's a really nice challenge to the idea that our perspectives are inevitably defined by the place that we come from, because it challenges the idea that we are from any place, and it really it challenges the idea of nationality and how our identity is kind of imposed upon us. It's almost an existential sort of idea that we can define where we're from. It's where we feel local, and then how that sort of affects our worldview and how we judge other people and other things and the world itself. So it's a beautiful idea, and a really it's one that really resonates with students. John Stuart Mill, the great English philosopher. I've gone from saying how nationality is a myth to talking about John Stuart Mill being English. Forget that. A great philosopher who had so many ideas, who was so ahead of his time. You know, if you're looking for a philosopher who won't sort of disappoint you in terms of his ethics and morality. You know how it is with great people. You find more about them and you get disappointed that, oh dear, they thought that, oh dear, they said that. John Stuart Mill is almost fail-safe because he was so ahead of his time. He was for voting for everyone regardless of gender and income and so forth. He was you know, anti-slave trade way before anyone else sort of picked up that baton. He was an amazing person. So he's got loads of ideas that we can draw on. The one that I think really works very well in TOK is the idea that we should be humble, that we should not assume that we are right. I mean, that sounds kind of obvious, but that we should be prepared to place our ideas, our beliefs, our philosophies up to the harshest possible scrutiny. And we should just allow them to be examined and questioned and you know, face a great deal of opposition from other people, because if they really are good ideas, if the integrity of them is solid, then we should be ready to have other people question them, and we shouldn't get offended if other people question what we're saying. And this is the key to viewing the world in an objective way. And when we are wrong, obviously we accept that we are wrong, and we learn from that. And you know, he argued that you can't move on without being able to do all of that. It's asking a lot, I know, and most people wouldn't be able to do that. I'm sure, you know, I often get offended when people question me. I hope I don't too much, but you know, it can be annoying when people are saying to you, well, I really think you've got that completely wrong. I like it when my students do it, perhaps more than other people, but it's tough. It's tough to be open in that way. The link there takes you to a video. It's not, I mean, I've said that we should go straight to the horse's mouth. I mean, look at John Stuart Mill's writings. He obviously wasn't around when TED was going. We haven't got videos of him talking or anything like that. He's way before that. But we have another philosopher in that link talking about him and why he thinks that John Stuart Mill is such a hero. So he I think is a key person for us in TOK. Underneath that, we have a Yale psychologist called Paul Bloom, who has a lot of short videos out there that are really easy to get hold of. I think this link takes you to an Atlantic video, a short video of him talking about one of his key ideas, which is a really nicely controversial one. Is what I was talking about, busting assumptions, that we shouldn't apply empathy when we make judgments about values. In other words, when we produce ethical knowledge, we should be very careful about just going with what we feel. He thinks that that can often lead us astray, and he gives some very powerful examples about how that is the case. Okay, so I think this is a really good one to get conversation going. I mean, I use this in a lesson called Feeding the Chickens, which I think is available to anyone if you go to the sample page of the website. I pitch him alongside Barack Obama, who talks about the empathy deficit in politics and how we need more empathy in order to understand and put ourselves in the shoes of other people. And then we have Paul Bloom saying, well, we've got to be careful about doing that because we can often make moral judgments that aren't useful. You know, he draws on the ideas of Peter Singer and his ethical altruism philosophy, which means that, you know, we should navigate our way through the ethical world, through the moral world, making judgments in a kind of cold, clinical way. And initially, I think this is quite a hard idea for students to take on board, but when they see the examples that Paul Bloom gives, and when they start thinking about it, it gets some great conversations going. So those are three thinkers who I think work very well. Now, you might notice that I've highlighted, I've made one of the words there on that slide bold. And those of you who are up to speed on the new TOK curriculum, maybe you've waded through the new TOK subject guide, you'll see that those are 3 of the 12 key concepts. Okay, so in this presentation, for each of our thinkers, I've tried to focus not just on an aspect of the course, but also on a key concept that they might help us to understand. So you can see the 3 there that I've picked out. Okay, so we move on to the optional themes. Now, again, maybe it's worth thinking about what we mean by optional themes. I mean, I found them when I first read the new guide, I found it hard to think of a way to define them. You know, I'm thinking of, you know, how am I going to introduce these to my students, the optional themes? And I came up with the definition that these were our personal and societal affiliations. Because it's quite hard, because you know you've got politics, which is clear, and religion, which is quite clear, but then you've got indigenous societies. So you know it's and technology. So some of these things we kind of use, some of these things we sort of belong to. So I think that the word affiliation is quite a useful one to describe what optional themes are. So here are 3 people who I think work really, really well with 3 of the different optional themes. Leslie Hazelton, I was blown away by when I saw her TED talk. I've also read some of her books. She's written biographies of Muhammad. She's not religious. I think she describes herself as an agnostic Jew, which makes her very, very interesting. I think an agnostic Jew who was brought up as a Christian, I think something like that, which is a brilliant combination of sort of religious backgrounds. And she's just so open-minded and brilliant when it comes to Islam, because she looks at Islam, she looks at the life of Muhammad, and her key idea, which you'll see in the talk here that this links you to, is how religious certainty, let me rephrase that. Religious knowledge is not built on certainty, that doubt is a part of understanding religious ideas. And I think, again, that's a fantastic assumption busting sort of idea for those of us who might be inclined to write religious thinkers off as being in some ways fanatical about what they believe and believing without evidence. You know, that's how we see faith. And I think to some degree that's valid. You know, faith is a belief in something without the kind of evidence that we might have if we're applying other sort of ways of knowing. But as she very, very convincingly talks about there, doubt plays a part in this as well. So I think this is a real, it's incredible. This talk it changed my life. It changed the way I look at religion. at Islam. And it's a great one for students if you have time to give them that. Again, it's built into all of these thinkers, I should say, are built into all of our lessons. So we come across all of these thinkers during the course of the big question framework, the lessons that form what members get from the site. So Leslie Hazelton is fantastic. Corey Stamper, you might have spotted if you are watching Nicolas Cage's History of Swear Words on Netflix, which is an interesting program, definitely one that could be used in TOK. I'm planning to do something with that shortly. I'd like to draw on that resource. I think it's quite a lot of fun. Corey Stamper is sort of is used as one of the linguistic experts in that program. And she has a lot to say about language. She's a former a dictionary writer for Merriam-Webster. So she's written dictionaries, which gives her a really interesting, actually a lot more interesting than you might expect, an interesting perspective. And her key idea that I think works really nicely in the TOK course, and if we're looking at language, is the idea of prescriptive versus descriptive interpretations of language. In other words, should dictionaries be prescriptive and tell us how to use language? And should we ourselves insist on language being used in a certain way? Or should dictionaries be descriptive, how language is used, charting the development of language over time? And you might not be surprised to learn that she's very much a descriptivist, and she thinks that dictionaries should be there to chart the course of language rather than tell us exactly how to use language. So that's a really nice concept for students to take on board and use themselves. Are you prescriptive or are you descriptive? Those kind of things work very, very well in TOK. And they're great words for them to use in the exhibition or in their essays. Wade Davis is, he truly is a hero of mine. He has possibly the coolest job description that I've ever heard, which is explorer in residence for the National Geographic. He also has spent a lot of time in Colombia, where I lived for a while. I absolutely love Colombia. It's one of my favorite places on earth. So, I have a lot of affinity for what Wade Davis says. I don't think there's anyone better to introduce us to Indigenous societies. And I really hope that a lot of people are going to do Indigenous societies, explore it, study it, use it as part of their course. I've built it into my big question lessons, because I think we should all be learning about Indigenous societies. I do think just doing two optional themes is a little bit thin on the ground. I advocate an approach whereby you do a little bit of all of the optional themes with your students. And then when it comes to the exhibition, they do further research, and the website is set up for them to go into any amount of detail on any aspect, on any of the optional themes. I think that's a more interesting approach than than spending weeks and weeks and weeks on just two of the optional themes. I'd love to see more schools doing Indigenous societies. So he talks very, very powerfully about how different cultures often have very, very different realities, and there isn't obviously just one way of living. And I often use this talk as a way of introducing TOK to students. I've done that with the students that I teach myself in my own school. I've also done it when I visited other schools and done workshops. I think this is an incredible idea that we can learn from different cultures, which we might initially think are really weird. Why do they do that? He looks at people who are what we might call, in a really patronizing way, pre-literate. But they've actually chosen, the Kogi people in Colombia, they've chosen not to be literate because they feel that breaks society apart. They think that as soon as you start reading, you actually lose contact with each other. You no longer need to have personal connections with each other, with the elders of the tribe. And I'd never before heard a convincing argument for not reading, but this is definitely one of them. It does fracture society because reading is so powerful. It does fracture society. Now, it's it's absolutely vital in larger scale societies, but in a small scale society, this is quite an interesting idea, and again, one that can challenge some assumptions that students might have. Okay, so those are three thinkers who I think work really, really nicely in connection to the optional themes. Finally, let's look at the areas of knowledge, the 5 areas of knowledge. And here are 3 people that have worked really, really nicely for me. Again, I think all of these thinkers are brilliant communicators, and they have brilliant ideas, so they tick both of those boxes. Lin-Manuel Miranda, of course, is the creator of Hamilton, so he's, you know, a pretty awesome fellow. And this link takes you to an article that he wrote about, as he puts it, what art brings to the table, and I explore the arts in relation to values, and how the arts help us to understand ethical principles and ethical ideas, and I think this is one of the most powerful aspects of art, you know, that it helps us to understand ethical ideas. It can be dangerous, you know, it can fictionalize an ethical issue or event. It can motivate our emotions and feel perhaps a different way. You know, maybe it clashes here with what Paul Bloom was saying that I mentioned earlier in the webinar. But nevertheless, I think its relationship with morality and ethics is a really, really interesting one. And he discusses how it can help us, how it can connect us with issues and ideas that of a moral nature. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is a fabulous, absolutely fabulous speaker, and this is one of my favorite TED Talks. I think it's one of the most watched TED Talks ever. It's all about single stories. The danger of a single story is how we judge other people via single stories. So we have one idea. I mean, I've mentioned Colombia, for example. We have one idea in our head what it's like in Colombia. Fortunately, we're moving away from that stereotypical view that was kind of exploited by Hollywood in a bunch of great movies, I have to say, but completely inaccurate movies. You know, when I told people I was moving to Colombia, they had all sorts of ideas that were not related at all to reality. So, you know, the single story, we all have that. We all have an idea of another place or another person via, quite often, one idea, one single story. I think this connects most interestingly for us via power. It's the idea that, you know, these single stories are determined by the more powerful culture. They're kind of imposed upon a people. You know, it's in other words, it's not us telling our stories ourselves, it's someone else telling our stories for us, which is inevitably going to be wrong, because, you know, if you can't tell the story yourself, then you can't get it across. So this is very, very useful for history. I use it in connection with history, but it's also useful for the human sciences as well, because, you know, what do we know about other cultures? Do we really know the truth about them, or are they just based on generalizations and these single stories? So that is a fantastic talk, I think, for students to take in. And you can ask them, of course, you know, have you ever suffered from single stories? You know, me teaching students in Latin America, from all over Latin America, you know, there tends to be a lot of ignorance about, you know, the realities of their lives from other people, and they mostly have suffered from single stories, and also, of course, asking them to think about how they themselves judge other people via single stories. You know, we British can be judged by a single story, although we seem to be living up to it right now with the government that we have, but never mind. Yeah, so finally, Elif Shafak is a fantastic Turkish writer. Again, I'm using nationalities here. It's irrelevant where she's from. She's just a great writer, fantastic writer, fantastic novelist. And in this talk, she refers to, again, we're talking about the arts here, how the arts can cut through antagonistic perspectives that maybe cut us off from other people, and unite us. And she talks about sort of breaking through our kind of mental barriers using art, using stories, using writing to do that. So, you know, that's just a lovely story, and you know, I offer this to my students as a possible way of overcoming the differences that we have as knowers, and how we can sort of collaborate a little bit more. Another of the 4 C's there. Okay, so those are 9 examples of knowledge heroes. All of these people feature in my lessons, in the lessons that I have on the website, in the lessons that I have for members, and they're all accessible on this Knowledge Heroes resource. So I have created, how are we doing for time? So we're doing quite well for time. I've created a playlist, well, several playlists, one for each of the big questions. And it's got about 120 videos in there from lots of different sources. There are lots of TED Talks. There are lots of big think, little sort of 3 or 4 minute interviews. There's lots of Atlantic videos, Guardian videos, lots of different videos from different sources. Again, these are all the ones that I use in our lessons. Not just the full-length lessons, but also the 10-minute TOK lessons, if you've spotted that on the website. And anyone, it's weird what happens there. Okay, sorry. Anyone can access them. You don't have to be a member of the site. You can just, when I send this presentation out, you can follow the link to our YouTube channel. You don't have to subscribe, obviously. You can just access the videos, but you might want to subscribe because I'm going to be adding videos periodically. And you'll see what they are, and you know, those 120 videos kind of represent what I mean by textbookless TOK, because I think, you know, that's a truly rich source of knowledge. You know, you're going straight to the original thinker, the original person, rather than having their ideas sort of regurgitated via a textbook. And I think for students as well, it's a lot more engaging, particularly now if you're teaching online, to be viewing these short videos rather than wading through pages of a textbook. So you know, that I hope is helpful to both members and non-members, and they come from some great sources. So finally, or not quite finally, almost finally, here is just a link to take you to the sample Knowledge Heroes resource, which, as I say, has quite a few different thinkers within it. If you're a member, you can access the full thing, which has just over 100 thinkers. I aimed for 100, but I've gone a little bit over that, and I'll probably be adding more people to it. They are people who all feature in our lessons. That's how I've chosen them. So, you know, if you like the look of those thinkers, then this resource will take you to the lesson where I discuss their ideas. It'll also give you a link to a website or some other article that they've written. It also gives you a link to their Wikipedia bio, and it gives you a key quote, you know, that summarizes the idea that I think works well in TOK. So I hope that this is a useful resource. It's something that I've been meaning to create for a long time, so I'm happy that it's finally out there. Okay, so just a very quick overview of what we do. We offer 72 full-length big question lessons. Again, you can follow the links to take you to these if you're not familiar with what they are. These are driven by the ideas of these knowledge heroes. They're driven by real-life situations. You know, I try not to sort of impose myself too much in TOK. I want my students to be going to the, as I say, the original source of knowledge. There are also 60 10-minute TOK lessons, again, drawing very heavily on these people, on these thinkers, on these ideas. These work both in TOK lessons and in non-TOK lessons. We're constantly updating the content that you see on the site, mainly via the newsletter, but largely through, you know, just coming across great ideas. If you have any questions about using these resources, if you have any questions about membership, then by all means get in touch with me using that email or just using any of the contact forms on the site. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick look at questions. I know that some people have sent questions in. Someone has pointed out nationalities may be a helpful label if it forces us to get away from the narratives that have mostly been privileged, as long as it doesn't just become a checkbox. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm very uncomfortable with the whole concept of nationalities. I I haven't yet worked out the use of them, and I'm inclined to think that they are more harmful than useful. But then I find myself supporting England when we play in the World Cup, and I think, what am I doing? You know, you can't get away from them to some degree. But I think one way of getting away from them is via this idea of being a multi-local, feeling at home, and that's the beauty of travel, isn't it? And that's the beauty of living abroad. You begin to understand that you can be at home in different places, and you belong to different places, especially if you end up marrying people from other countries, which is, I think, what I'd recommend to everyone to do. If anyone has any more questions, I mean, we're at 11:40, which gives us a little bit of time. If anyone does have any questions, I'll be happy to take them now. If you're trying to formulate something in your head which you can't send in quickly, then I will happily accept an email. If you use the Q&A, I have discovered this to my cost, that the chat gets completely deleted, but the Q&A I still have access to even when I end this webinar. So we do have a Q&A. Hang on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I might be able to access it. There we go. Okay, so someone has said, does it work against a student to use less known thinkers? Would they do better picking well-published authors? I think the reverse is likely to be the case. You know, I try and make, I mean, I think there are some ideas that you know, students really need to have, you know, some well-known thinkers, you know, even if we don't like the idea, you know, we do need some awareness of people like Plato. We do need, I think, a little bit of Socrates. I don't know, I have a few other thinkers that I think are, that you have to come across. But I, as much as possible, I try to make my students use lesser known thinkers. If they have a great idea, if they have an idea that works really, really well in TOK, I think that's the only qualification, really. And I think actually, if they're including them in an exhibition and in an essay, they're only going to get praise for having, you know, picked on less obvious thinkers. Thinkers that might have resonated with them more personally, as long as they are, you know, this is the sticky area, isn't it? You know, when we talk about lesser known, are we talking about less respected? Are we talking about dubious sources? Obviously, they need to be able to justify their ideas via, you know, valid evidence, and you know, we don't want sort of pseudoscientists appearing and so forth. So no, I definitely encourage my students to use lesser known thinkers, you know, even thinkers connected to them, family members, people who have influenced them, people who have given them great ideas, you know, and I think that's a good route for the exhibition, because I don't think you should be picking obvious objects. I think you should be picking objects that resonate with you personally, that might have been inspired by someone you know, a friend, a family member, etc., etc. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that it would work against them. We have where someone is from is not irrelevant, but is not always defining. Troy, I agree. It's good to see you, Troy. Your name, thank you. I agree. Yeah, it's not. It can never be irrelevant, is it? But it's not always defining. And if it is the thing that is defining, then I think that's a sad sort of indictment, really, I suppose. If that's what we cling to, if that's what we say is the thing that defines us more than any other, I think that's a shame. I've got another question in the questions and answer. Someone is giving a recommendation. Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass, all to do with indigenous wisdom. Yeah, brilliant. I'm very happy to recommend anything to do with indigenous societies, formerly indigenous knowledge. I think that's great. I've got quite a lot of close friends who are archaeologists living in different parts of the world, and they're always passing me on these incredible ideas from indigenous societies. Someone is saying, will students be penalized if schools allow them to work on all 5 options and not use 2 for their exhibition? They're not using 2 for the exhibition, they're only using 1 for the exhibition. So they should be basing their commentary on either the core theme or one of the optional themes. The IB recommends that you teach 2 optional themes and the core theme. I suggest that you cover all of them in at least a tiny amount of detail, maybe focus on 2 or 3 in a little more detail, but then encourage your students to do their own personal research, you know, and go into more detail. I'm picking language. Okay, so here are some articles for you to look at, you know, related to your IA prompt. On the site, there's a lot of information, a lot of content for all of the optional themes. You know, I think they should do a little bit of work on their own with your guidance, with your help, because I think we should almost be seeing the optional themes as kind of things to hook them, right? So this is what you could be doing in Indigenous societies. This is what you should be doing in language. I think, you know, if you maybe just teach 2 optional themes, you're going to have a very narrow range of exhibitions, where if you cover all 5 and you've really given some powerful ideas in all 5 of those optional themes, you're going to have students going in all directions, and you're going to have a much more diverse range of exhibitions, I think. Okay, I think that might be it. So if anyone has any more questions, any more feedback, any more suggestions, please send more suggestions. I will copy this suggestion down and send it out to you, because I think this is a really good suggestion. Hang on, we've got one more question. In the essay, how do you encourage students to use experts for wrestling with perspectives, rather than simply using them as proof texts? It's really hard to say without, you know, putting it into the context of an actual essay. I mean, I'll tell you when you're doing that. You know, I've said this before, during the 3 interactions, that's when you're working with students to do this kind of thing. A little trick that I use with my students is, because students tend to want to jump straight into their examples, their real world issues and events, their real life situations, they tend to sort of introduce the claim, then jump straight into their example. And I say, try and put a thinker or an idea or a theory in between your claim and your example, which will help you to kind of both to discuss the claim and also to explore a different perspective. Yeah, it's hard to know exactly, you know, how that would work without the actual context of a prescribed title. Okay, I'm going to put together the recording. I will send this out to you. I will take some of these comments and add it to the debrief. Thank you very, very much for attending. It was nice to see some familiar names out there from all over the world, and I will let you know as soon as the recording is ready. So if you are not watching this live, you can watch this, which is a bit strange to say that, because you obviously won't be watching right now. Okay, many thanks. I hope you join us for the next one. In the next one, I'm going to be discussing the exhibition in more detail and trying to link it more to the optional themes, because I think and the core theme, I think we really need to understand the relationship between this new assessment task and the content that it is supposed to draw on. So I'm going to try and demystify that, and hopefully get a bit of a discussion going with you guys, and get your feedback on how you're sort of doing that. Okay, many thanks. Have a very good day, and I hope to see you again in early February. Thank you very much.